You write out the perfect daily schedule and follow it flawlessly for 3 days. But by day 4, you crumple it up in total frustration. We usually blame a lack of willpower when this happens, but the breakdown is often a structural mismatch between the problem you have and the psychological tool you're using to fix it. The behavioral science landscape is crowded with theories, over 82 distinct academic models. But when you filter for the evidence, you find that just 4 of these frameworks account for over 60% of the published research. The problem is, most advice isolates a single one of these tools, like habit loops or nudges, and markets it as a universal solution for every situation. This oversimplification explains the common intention behavior gap. Statistically, nearly half of all people who form a strong, motivated intention to change fail to act on it. That gap widens even more when you take an intervention that worked in a controlled lab and move it into the messy, real-world conditions of your actual life. To bridge that gap, you have to treat change like a medical diagnosis. You need to pinpoint the specific behavioral bottleneck before you can prescribe a fix. To find that bottleneck, ask one diagnostic question. Is the friction rooted in your physical environment, your sense of identity and skill, or your basic need for autonomy? If your gym is a 45-minute drive away in heavy traffic, a motivational pep talk is a waste of time. No amount of inspiration can solve a physical friction problem. On the other hand, if a deep fear of judgment keeps you from public speaking, a shallow environmental tweak, like putting a sticky note reminder on your monitor, will do nothing. Depending on where that bottleneck sits, you have 3 strategic paths. You can nudge the environment, boost the identity, or accidentally trigger a defensive response called reactance. A mismatched strategy fails twice. It leaves the original friction intact while burning through the limited motivation you need for the next attempt. The first strategy is choice architecture, or nudging. This is the practice of changing how options are presented to steer a decision without officially taking away anyone's freedom to choose. Nudges work by lowering the effort required for a task. As this graph shows, if you make a behavior easy enough, a person crosses the action line and performs the behavior even when their motivation is low. This is highly effective for one-time, immediate decisions. In policy design, changing the default settings for things like organ donation or 401k enrollment can move registration rates from 40% to over 90%. But there is a catch known as the nudge illusion. When these interventions move from labs to government or corporate settings, the results often shrink by over 80%. Nudges also struggle with sustained habits like fitness or deep work. They rely on the design of the room rather than the capacity of the person. The moment you leave that engineered environment, the prompt is gone, the friction returns, and the new behavior stops. Friction reduction is a great administrative tool, but the data suggests it lacks the mechanism required for long-term personal transformation. For durable change, we look to the opposite strategy, boosting. This relies on self-determination theory, focusing on empowering the individual rather than steering them. This spectrum shows the difference in the quality of your drive. On the left is controlled motivation, acting for a reward or under pressure. On the right is autonomous motivation, acting because the behavior aligns with who you are. The goal of a boost is to move a person toward that green zone. You are investing time to build their actual competence and their belief that they can handle the task themselves. The trade-off is the cost. Boosting requires heavy upfront time, patience, and mental effort from both the person leading and the person learning. That investment makes this strategy difficult for a manager or policymaker who needs immediate, low-cost compliance from thousands of people at once. While boosts are slower, they are the only mechanism in the research that reliably sustains a habit after the context changes. Then there is the third path, which is where many interventions go wrong. This is the attempt to force change through heavy-handed rules, through coercive incentives, or reverse psychology. Coercion triggers psychological reactance, an automatic defensive response that occurs when someone perceives their freedom of choice is being threatened. We saw this during public health mandates. Strict top-down directives can trigger such intense reactance that people will actively protest a beneficial behavior just to reclaim their autonomy. Even perceived limits on freedom, like pandemic supply chain issues, drive irrational defiance. People engage in panic buying and hoarding to regain a sense of control over their choices. In daily life, Subtle manipulation, like using reverse psychology on a friend or colleague, erodes the interpersonal trust required for future cooperation. A reactant response creates a spillover effect. It halts the behavior and taints the individual's attitude toward the subject matter long after the pressure is removed. Relying on pressure is a high-risk strategy. Even if it forces short-term compliance, it often breaks the relational bond required for genuine change. We can simplify these choices with an action map. This routes your specific goal to the correct behavioral framework based on one question: who are you trying to change? For yourself, start with nudges. Reduce friction to get a habit initiated, but understand you'll need to transition into identity building once the initial novelty wears off. If you are a leader, abandon external rewards. Use boosts to train competence, and frame every request in a way that preserves your team's autonomy. If you're a policymaker, use nudges and defaults for administrative hurdles, but acknowledge that they cannot solve deep educational or skill-based deficits. Mapping the right framework to your specific bottleneck removes the frustration of failed interventions and tells you exactly where your effort will actually pay off. We've seen how environments can steer us and boosts can empower us. But if we look back at those 82 academic models, we find one variable that predicts success more consistently than any other. It's the common thread through every effective intervention: self-efficacy. This is the internalized belief in your own capability to perform a specific action and overcome a specific barrier. Whether you are designing a nudge, engineering a boost, or navigating around reactance, the ultimate goal is the same: increasing that sense of self-efficacy. Because true behavior change isn't about hacking the room with psychological tricks. It's about building the competence and the confidence to take action, regardless of the room you're in.